and how things can change so quickly in professional cycling. Visma was so far beyond, better than the best, that to imagine now that they're like playing catch up.
The only thing that I have a bit of pause with is that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's a lot of talent, a lot of people who are used to being at the forefront. They are the stars.
But I don't want to pretend that I'm not a huge Remco Evenepoel fan, but I just don't see him being ready against Roglic, against Jonas, against even Matteo, and especially against Tadej Pogačar in the Tour de France in the big mountains, at least this year.
And if you have a rider who has a maturity level of Matteo, like we already talked about, and now you have confidence, that's the last year. Now we're cruising.
Honestly, I want Primoz to avoid those crashes. And I think that perhaps I wanted to run this by you. He didn't start cycling as a teenager. He didn't start racing his bike as a young athlete like a lot of the big stars we see nowadays. And maybe he didn't acquire that sort of supernatural ability to anticipate and avoid pileups, which Tadej Pogačar, by the way, is maybe the best I've ever seen at that. Welcome all to Beyond the Podium. Dauphiné just wrapping. Primož Roglič, the winner. Matteo Jorgenson, second, just 8 seconds slower. Remco Evenepoel, an up and down week. And a big stage win by Carlos Rodriguez on the final day. And also an interview that we didn't get to hear from in the live call with Matteo Jorgenson. All of that on Beyond the Podium. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Christian Vande, a fantastic week of racing. And I thought that it was going to be a miracle if Roglic would win, just based on what he's gone through in a similar situation in the past. And I'm surprised and quite happy for Primoz and his team board that he did pull it off, but I had my doubts, and it looked very good until about 3 miles to go, and then it started coming apart at the seams in the final few hundred meters of climbing today. It was a crazy day.
It was close. I had extreme confidence in him, actually, that he was going to pull it off, and I didn't really think that anyone was really going to give him a good push to the finish line to take that yellow jersey. And so I was actually surprised on the other side that how close Matteo was. Maybe just a little bit of Monday morning quarterback that he could have gone a little bit harder earlier, but you never know. I mean, it's hard not to second guess yourself a lot of times in those kind of situations. But nonetheless, fourth closest Dauphiné on record. It was incredible. It was a very testing last 3 days as well.
That's pretty amazing right there, that there's been 3 Dauphinés that were closer than this one.
Yeah. And we're in the 70 some. How many of these have we had? 75?
76th edition, yes.
76th edition. So yeah, we're going back decades upon decades. I mean, the first closest one, 1 second with Pavel Tonkov in 2001. But to hear 8 seconds, I mean, that is so close. Yeah, for my mind, I was surprised, to be honest, with the other way that you were. You were just thinking that Primoz, I'm sure you're just thinking he's going to crash, something bad was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
But it didn't. But his legs did fall apart. And, if you think back at his interviews in the last couple of days, he almost surprised himself how good he was. He beat himself up pretty bad in those 2 crashes that he had. He was in the crash of pretty much everyone apart from Matteo and Sepp Kuss, who were a part of on stage number 5. He went down pretty well. And he also crashed the day before that as well. So nonetheless, the biggest thing I always say, and we've always said this, is that it's hard not to read into a lot of the results and what happens during the Dauphiné, but you can't. The Tour de France is a completely different animal. You could see a lot of highlights. You could see a lot of things, trends. You want to see a trend that you were getting better. You want to see a trend that you have momentum coming out of it, and then hopefully you're going to recover that much quicker and be able to build that much quicker on the heels of Dauphiné and get ready for the Tour de France. Apart from that, though, we saw, Derek G was a massive standout, and I'm going to put Matteo in that as well. I mean, I don't know if Matteo would have said that he was going to be this close to winning outright here. I mean, we saw him do incredible things in Paris-Nice, But high mountains like we saw with 37,000 feet of climb in the last 3 days, hats off, Matteo. That was impressive riding.
What worries me about Primoz is every time there's a crash,
he jumps
Primoz he's in it. It's incredible. It's like, oh no, crash. Where is Roglic? Oh man, I mean, it's got to be at a certain point. Something you have to be better at than Primoz has been. And he's lost a lot of big races because of that. So I thought that the accumulated damage would affect him at some point throughout the week's racing. And it seemed like it was the last 3 kilometers of today's stage. But the 2 previous days, not that much pressure from the other GC contenders. He was able to mitigate that damage and win those 2 stages. But I thought, oh no, how many times have we seen this, Christian? It's so nerve-wracking. And honestly, I want Primoz to avoid those crashes.
Yeah.
And I think that perhaps I wanted to run this by you. He didn't start cycling as a teenager. He didn't start racing his bike as a young athlete like a lot of the big stars we see nowadays. And maybe he didn't acquire that sort of supernatural ability to anticipate and avoid pileups, which Tadej Pogačar, by the way, is maybe the best I've ever seen at that.
Yeah. I mean, let's be fair. There are some times, and I'll get to your point, but the stage 5, that pileup, that's completely out of your control. You're at the mercy of everyone who's ahead of you, and whether or not there was something on the road, but everyone's going down. Whether you like it or not, you're going down in there, unless you're absolutely on the front, like we saw with Matteo. But yeah, that's a great point, Bob. Some people push the envelope a little bit harder than others. Some people get a little bit too nervous once in a while, and you see that. I fell victim to that, especially towards the later end of my career, where I didn't have the form and I need to really push myself into the right position, the right time at all times, and sometimes not having the legs to back that. I don't think that's been the case with Primoz sometimes, though, especially at the Tour de France. But it just seems like you said at the top of the show, it's like if there's a crash, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time most often. I mean, like the hay bales in the cobblestone stage a couple of years ago, Bob. I mean, how could he know that a motorcycle is going to hit a hay bale right before him and he's going to go and dislocate his shoulder coming into it? So it seems like he's just, I don't know, for how lucky he seems he could be, he's equally unlucky on the other sides.
And Paris-Nice, it happened. Dauphiné.
Okay, that was bad. Yeah, that's right.
I remember in the Vuelta, he's alone by himself in the front on one stage. And I said, and we were calling that stage, all he has to do is get through this next corner safely. Whoosh! And it's like, oh no, Primoz, come on. I, by the way, I'm a huge fan of Primoz Roglič, and I want him to get safely through each stage so we can see him at his best, what he does. And that's chip away at the leads, and a great climber, great time trialist, and a fast sprinter. There's no reason he shouldn't have won the Tour a couple of times at this point, Christian. So
I think he's
got another chance to do it.
If I'm going to say anything about it, I would say it's aggression. And we have some riders that are always going to be a little bit more aggressive than others and always push a little bit harder than others. And maybe that's the only thing I could say. I'm not going to chalk it up to that consideration that he's coming to sport as late, which is a great point, though, as well, coming from ski racing or coming from ski jumping, I should say. But there's some things that obviously are out of your control. And sometimes when your time is up and you're going down, whether you like it or not. But you were right. You backed up with some very hard facts of things that have happened in the past and reasons to have trepidation for Primoz going to the last stage. First and foremost, staying on your bike, not necessarily falling apart like you did, which has happened as well. I mean, you think back to the Dauphiné, that almost when Carapaz, not the Dauphiné, the Vuelta, Carapaz shredding him on the 20th stage. That was close. That was very close. It actually felt exactly like today. I'm just happy for Matteo that the difference wasn't winning the stage, that time bonus, that difference between 10 seconds and 6 seconds, because if it was 4 seconds that he lost by today, that would have hurt so bad, or 3 or something like that. That would have been brutal. But nonetheless, I think that Matteo can hold his head up very high after the way he raced. Again, like I said, maybe a little bit of Monday morning quarterback of how he played it out. But you don't know until it happens, right? You never know how bad they stuff. And considering that Primoz put him to the sword the previous 2 days, it'd be hard to really have that confidence going anyways, where Matteo was the only one who could even stay on his wheel just yesterday. I don't know.
Well, I was impressed with Primoz, but for the team, maybe more importantly than Primoz winning the Dauphiné, the confidence and the investment they've made and the difference he's made to the program to actually deliver. For me, that was important for his teammates going into the Tour de France, as it was for himself, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Jai Hindley was definitely stepping up. I think he'll be a lot better at the Tour de France. He's starting to get better and better. Bob Jungels was getting better. He's one of the stalwarts he's going to have to be by his side as a team captain on the road. And Vlasov, exceptional during this week. So strong team. They rode well together. And Primoz brought up this point early, I think the first day or before the first day, talking about he hasn't really had the opportunity to truly race with a team too many times. If you take away the time trial, the one time trial that he won in the Basque Country and the time trial also in Paris-Nice, he's only had 9 days of racing with his team since he's been on this team, since he left Jumbo-Visma last year. So yeah, he needed every day to get the team and get the team morale, to have the full backing of his team and get that confidence going. And it's all about momentum. We're going to talk about this all the time. And you always want the momentum coming out of the race, going into a big rendezvous with the Tour de France, and especially how hard this first week of racing, where you need to be on point. So I think most of these riders, apart from maybe a few like David Gaudu I mentioned in the show, he would be one of the guys I totally call it that there's no chance you could put him on the favorites list. Like, no, just no. But most, even I would say the same thing goes to Remco Evenepoel. I'm not displeased the way he raced, winning the time trial by himself. And I think that he got better and better. He said himself he hadn't had that much time. He had to do so much work on his body off the bike before he could even think about truly training. So I think he's going to be okay as well. It's still close. This day and age, you don't want to be too far off the mark with 2.5, 3 weeks to go. So he's got some work to do, both on and off the bike up until the Tour. But I'm giving him the nudge that he's going to be ready when things all start, when the hat drops in Florence. I think Remco's gonna be ready.
UAE just announced their roster for the Tour de France. How do they stack up against Bora, for example?
Dude, UAE they can come up with like 3 teams. That'd still be great. I mean,
that's a good point. If they were allowed 3 teams in the Tour, I think they'd have a couple of guys in the top 10, win 5 stages, get the overall win. It's just an incredible budget that they have, let's be honest. But the team for the Tour de France, it looks really solid. And I think that they have a big advantage for Tadej Pogačar over every other team in the Tour de France, in my estimation, in all honesty.
The only thing that I have a bit of pause with is that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's a lot of talent, a lot of people who are used to being at the forefront. They are the stars, and to be second fiddle to someone else. And I'm thinking about Yusuf first and foremost. Not that he's a jerk or anything bad by any stretch. It's just character, And,
yeah, it's the hard wiring. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we love him, because he does go flat out. So Ayuso didn't finish this race, for example. So I think they'll all be good. That's the only thing I could come up with as a negative, just being devil's advocate in this conversation, because they are on paper unbelievable. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the team on paper, and especially I can't wait to see Ayuso. I think that he will elevate his riding stature with the eyeballs that are going to be at him. I feel like he has that kind of class. Almeida's always been to me sometimes just when it comes to being a teammate, as far as going deep in the mountains. He's got it, but a lot of times he doesn't have that massive acceleration to go really deep and make the pace as hard as Tadej needs to go to attack off that. But all the other soldiers, it's a strong team. But like I said, if I'm going to play devil's advocate, there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen, and that's the front office, just to try to keep those guys in line, keep them happy, remind them that they're going to have their chance next year or this chance over here. Because when you start thinking about, well, when am I going to get my opportunity to shine? When can I go and get a stage win, or when can I go for the general classification? You might be waiting a while, because he's just have to be like he's just getting the engines going yet again.
And how things can change so quickly in professional cycling. Wiesma was so far beyond better than the best.
Yes.
That to imagine now that they're like playing catch up.
Yeah.
Matteo Jorgenson, we'll get to Matteo in a second, but for the rest of that squad, to think that Bora would be better at this point in the season, that UAE most certainly would be better, and Ineos riding great, by the way. We'll see if Egan Bernal or Carlos Rodriguez is the leader in the Tour de France, but Wiesma is a big question mark for me at this point in the season.
I think they have a lot of questions as well. I don't think you're alone in that. I mean, if they're going to be honest, they don't know exactly what's going to happen. I think that it's going to go day by day, and I think it's going to come all the way down to the wire of some of the decisions they're making, and maybe even some decisions during the tour itself. I mean, this week is a great example of that. But I mean, this is a great point you brought up. Steven Kruijswijk, Dylan van Baarle, two of the strongest real lieutenants that they have on their team, are now out of the tour entirely. Sepp Kuss had to not start today's stage. Today's Sunday. With the last stage, they did not get to start with Sepp Kuss, and he has been a shell of himself, let's be honest, the entire Dauphiné. So I'm not too scared of Sepp, but it's a hard fact that those two riders, Stevie and Dylan, will not be at the Tour de France. It's a massive hole, man. No, I don't care who's putting those guys in. Who are you putting in there?
Right.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Not to fill those shoes.
And while maybe not at their best either.
Yeah.
So time will tell. Wiesma, though, they might not be the dominant force they have been in recent years in the Tour de France, that's for sure. And UAE, an embarrassment of riches, and Bora riding so good. Time will tell, but it definitely might make for a much more interesting Tour de France if Jonas is not at his very best, when last year was an absolute runaway, starting with the time trial.
But they've been sneaky. They've been quiet about Jonas's progress or lack thereof. We don't really know. We're not privy to his numbers, what he's been doing in training. You can see some things. You can see just what he looks like physically. There's a picture of him, obviously, up in the Alps not so long ago, and you can see his time trial bike in the background as well. So he's obviously still riding his time trial bike. So he's not just training a little bit. He's training a lot, and with specificity as well. So he's riding the time trial bike when it's flat and the downhills and recovery. I think he's going to be there. I really didn't think at all. After spending 12 days in the hospital after the crash in the basket country, I didn't think it was going to be a possibility for him to come back. I'm pumped that he has, but it's another big decision because you don't want to bring Jonas there just to have Jonas there. You want him there to be a challenger. And this is a guy who just won the tour the last 2 years. You're not bringing him to get 7th or 8th. No way. That's too big of an asset, especially going forward and looking to next year. So it's the time is ticking quickly. We've been having this conversation for the last month within our crew here, and I can't believe how quickly it's going by. I mean, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. You're leaving even closer to go over to Italy.
Got to get to Italy early. The pasta awaits, Christian.
Good reason to get over there.
Even if Jonas is at his best, you got to imagine Matteo, the young American on the squad, will be a protected rider throughout at least the opening stages of the Tour de France for the Wiesma squad.
I would assume so, Bob. I would 100% assume so. And I think that I would even put Sepp in there, even though he wasn't able to perform at his best this week. He's a gamer. He's going to be ready. He knows exactly what he needs to do to get himself ready. Obviously, he had some kind of stumbling with sickness, whatever his issues were this year. He was nowhere close to his best this last 8 days of racing, or 7 for him. So I'm going to put Sepp into that mix as well. So having 3 years, I don't like that conversation though either. You want to go to a race with just one leader, 100%. But with so many question marks, how do you do that? That's scary.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be tricky, and not having Dylan and not having Stevie there, and Wout still being a question mark. Hopefully he's going to be there. I assume, especially that Dylan is now out, I assume that Wout is going to have to be pushed a little bit here to go and do the Tour de France and not be able to 100% focus on the Olympic Games. So that's my guess. I don't know. I don't know any more than yourself. What do you think? Do you think Wout's going to be there? I definitely do.
Yeah, Stefan. He started to get better. Tour of Norway, better and better each day, third on the final stage. And from that point, almost a month, maybe a month plus before the Tour de France. And we see nowadays with Roglic, with Vingegaard, with Pogacar, with Remco, not having a lot of races is sometimes an asset. And same with Matteo. Matteo Jorgenson doesn't need that many races because training now is so specific and so geared toward being successful at the big objectives of the season. I think that Wout would be solid, and Matteo especially is going to be even better at the Tour de France, and that's going to be something to see. But this week, Matteo was really, really solid. He just missed the win, and maybe because of winning Paris-Nice, which was a big surprise to Matteo and everybody else earlier in the year, might be a little bit disappointed, but his week, I thought, went really, really well, about as well as could be expected. And Roglic was just a tiny bit better at the end of the whole week of racing.
And like you brought up in the show, without those time bonuses, it's always like that, though, with Roglic. How many times have we call it the Roglification? He's always getting those time bonuses across the line. He's just that much quicker than the other climbers. Did a great time trial. Third place, 39 seconds behind Remco Evenepoel. So, yeah, I think that Roglic is definitely, but back to Matteo. I think that he's gaining that confidence every day. I think he goes into the unknown with every race that we've seen this year. He's never gone that far in Paris-Nice. He's never tried to go and win a one-day classic. Like, okay, he's tried, but never really truly had the capabilities of doing so and that kind of pressure going forward with one of the best teams. So he's definitely flown the flag for that squad, and thank God they signed him. And, it's funny to think that, there's a lot of question marks with Matteo going to that strong squad. And it was the same thing as UAE, embarrassment of riches. When are you going to be given the opportunity to be the leader of the team? How are you ever going to go and race for yourself? Well, obviously he's had the best season we could ever have prayed for. And it's still only halfway through the season. Let's see what happens to the Tour.
His interview coming a little bit after the podium presentation, or at least to our eyes. And we did get a chance to hear from him after the stage finished. And he was second on the stage and won the Best Young Riders jersey. Maybe in the, I don't know, days, probably not, but weeks and months to come, losing out on the Dauphiné by only 8 seconds. I was very impressed of how steady, how calm, how unpanicked, how safely, how much chaos there was, and how Matteo avoided all of it through the week's racing. And that's down to his character. And I think that that's a big piece of the puzzle for being a contender in a 3-week tour. And Matteo in this Dauphiné and in the Paris-Nice, by the way, and throughout just about every season, he seems to be not immune to the chaos of professional cycling, but at least a little bit better than many of his rivals.
Yeah, maturity way beyond his years. There's no doubt about that. And we've been saying that for a couple of years, even when he was pretty much the lone soldier doing everything for himself on Movistar. But now with the backing, the squad that he has with Visma Lease Bike, he's having a good time. And he's saying that's been the biggest shift in his mentality, that how much happier he is that he's not by himself doing altitude camp. He's not, who cares about the monetary side? We're having to do it yourself, but it really just being alone, that's not easy, nor is it fun. So having that team structure around him and the maturity level, like you said, those pay massive dividends. It's how you are socially, of course, to get along with your team, but to be able to take the days and take the stress and stay calm and collected. At 24 years old, okay, he's going to be 25 in the first week of the Tour de France. A very mature kid. Where he could go is anyone's guess from here. I mean, we saw a lot of similarities with Jonas when he was working for Primoz in the Dauphiné, when he had to put the brakes on and wait for Primoz on the last stage. It were, holy man, this kid is incredible. And then Primoz crashing out, him getting the green light, and he getting second place. Like, oh my goodness. And then, of course, we all know what happened the last 2 years, winning back-to-back. So like you said earlier, cycling changes really quickly these days. It doesn't take the years of development anymore. There's so much information at our fingertips. Nutrition has changed things with larger riders being able to go deeper into high mountains stage races like we saw here with both Derek G and Matteo, 6'3", 6'2", massive kids going deep. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm very excited. There was a time when the Giro had just finished and I was terrified looking. I was like, oh my goodness, Teddy is going to sweep the floor with everyone. And that still might happen.
That still might happen.
That still might happen. But, we're just going to have to wait. Anything could happen. I think there's a lot more players coming into focus as we get closer into the Tour. Yes, it still may happen. As I said that, I'm second guessing my statement.
Well, let's hear what Matteo had to say after today's stage when he had another very good day in the Critérium du Dauphiné. Best young rider, but let's hear from Matteo after today's stage.
It's a grueling finish. Did you see what was going on behind? Did you see that Primoz was struggling?
Yeah, I had a feeling from the start of the day. On the foreclaw, the first climb of the day, the break was going and it was quite hard, and I just had a feeling Primoz was struggling a bit. And yeah, thankfully I was correct. Just have to thank Tige, because he really, the whole day was telling me, believe in yourself, you can do it. And yeah, I just think sometimes throughout my whole career, maybe others have believed in me more than I've believed in myself, and that needs to change. I think this is the last time that I don't believe in myself.
Did you have the time gaps in your ears? You had like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 35 seconds, 45 seconds, getting closer to a potential yellow jersey. You were listening to all the gaps?
Yeah, of course. It was non-stop in the radio. And yeah, I was just trying to do my best. In the end, like, the gaps didn't really help so much because I was just trying to give my best effort, and it was also getting a bit complicated. I didn't want G to then come around because he was really close to me, and so I just was being careful. But once he was dropped, I went all in with Carlos, and I got close, really close, but it wasn't to be this time.
Any regrets?
No regrets. It's been a really good week, and I leave here super happy and ready for the Tour de France.
And you leave with a jersey on your shoulders, and that's also always nice, I suppose, for your collection.
Definitely, my last year in the white jersey, and it's super nice.
See you on the Tour.
Thanks, Seb.
See you on the Tour. Can't wait to see Matteo in this year's Tour de France for the Visma squad. And protected rider, most certainly, would be probably good tactics for the Visma team, and maybe sharpen his form a little bit. What does Matteo need to do between now and the Tour de France, Christian, to be at his very best?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway there is the confidence, Bob. That's never going to happen again. I loved hearing that. I think a lot of us, everyone has struggled with confidence at some point in time, especially if you're not just born into winning, like Tade, for example, where you that's all you know, and you don't even question anything about this is the way you race. Whereas, when I spoke to Matteo before the race started, he had to start questions how his body was going to react with 3 massive days in the mountains, and I'm saying, just see how these broad shoulders can make it up the hills. And so when you change your mindset from, okay, I'm not just making it through this, I'm flourishing, and I'm second place, and now I have the opportunity of winning this outright, all within 5 kilometers time. This all adjusts. In hindsight, maybe if he would have gone from the bottom, and he also referenced the fact that he saw that Primoz was struggling on the first Category 1 climb, the 4 claws coming out of Annecy. And then of course Ties Benoot saying, hey, just believe in yourself. And many of us have had those problems, that fear of failure or imposter syndrome when you're with a rider like Primoz, who, let's be honest, beat him up pretty good in the previous 2 stages, but you just don't know until you actually race. So I think the biggest takeaway there is his confidence has grown exponentially. This solidified what he did in Paris-Nice, which was already a massive surprise to himself, the team, myself, everyone around the world. He's someone to contend with. And if you have a rider who has maturity level of Matteo, like we already talked about, and now you have confidence, that's the last gear. Now we're cruising. And just you just have to just give yourself the right opportunities. And he's given himself every opportunity. Like you mentioned, Bob, he's always really in control of his emotions and himself on the bike. Even saying that he was quite conservative in the first 2 days and not wanting to go too deep. And then today, I'm going to give it a shot and see what I could do. Maybe again, not in his wildest dreams would he have thought he was going to come within 8 seconds as well today. So that being the last stumbling block of any athlete, and especially in professional cycling these days, where the top tier is it just hair's difference in form and strength. And if you have the confidence to attack, sometimes that's the biggest moneymaker right there. That's the biggest difference there is, that confidence to really or take away the fear and just race your bike like you know how to do.
How do you reckon he divined that Primoz was in trouble on the first climb of the day? I thought Primoz looked pretty solid to the last few kilometers, but Matteo must have some solid tactical abilities also. I mean, it's physically spectacular, but that's impressive to me, Christian.
Well, we didn't get to see that. They didn't do wall-to-wall coverage like we would be at the Tour de France. So we didn't get to see how they're racing at the Four Claws. So maybe he heard, obviously, as well as I do, sometimes you could even hear the breath rate of a rider next to you. They're way over their limit, the way they're pedaling sometimes. And they're just not doing Primoz things. Primoz, once in a while, he just decides to go to front. He'll pass 20 guys. If he wasn't doing those kind of things and he's pinned or maybe just panicking a little bit, you could take some things out of the equation. And I think that just shows you how good Matteo was as well. If he's that in the moment, that he's already looking around and judging riders around him, and he has the wherewithal to do so, that shows, again, his maturity level.
Impressive.
And it's just his cycling IQ. So I think everyone's very, very forward and very bullish on Matteo going forward and seeing what he could do in the Tour.
How about Remco? I thought I thought Josh Tarling was going to stomp everybody in the time trial. So when Remco won that, I was like, oh boy, here we go. The Belgians, as usual, are lying about their form when we don't know absolutely for sure. And he's saying, no, I'm off the back. I'm not at my best. I need some time. But on the last 3 days in the mountains until today, where he was better, kind of was like, okay, maybe he wasn't lying. And it looked like he needed more time to me than he has before the Tour de France starting in Florence in 20 days, Christian.
So you're saying that he still needs, let's say, another week or so
I would,
on top of that, Bob?
In my estimation, to be capable of doing what he can and win the Tour. And you got to go back to Lucien Van Impe for a Belgian, the cycling craziest nation on earth to have a Tour winner. Maybe that'll be a stumbling block, but I don't want to pretend that I'm not a huge Remco Evenepoel fan, but I just don't see him being ready against Roglic, against Jonas, against even Matteo, and especially against Tadej Pogačar in the Tour de France in the big mountains, at least this year.
For the win, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think he's going to be heads and shoulders better than what we saw this week in the Dauphiné. But I'm not going to disagree with you there. I think he's in good shape to be able to be a solid podium contender. But honestly, Bob, I didn't put him above that before. And this is before, the big crash of Jonas Vingegaard in the Basque Country. I didn't put him on the same level in the Tour de France as Tadej and Jonas. I always saw him as being the best after those guys. Is he an incredible bike rider, to your point? Yeah, absolutely. When he's on his day, good luck trying to beat that kid.
Yes.
But I think you're right. I'm not going to disagree with you at all. I think he could definitely use another week of prepping and fine tuning. That said, though, again, I think that he looked so much better, and it's all about just getting better and better, trying to recover as quickly as you possibly can, not push too hard, but definitely work in fine tuning that engine in the last 2 or so weeks we have before coming back down from altitude. If they're going to go back up to, which I'm assuming that he will be. So I think he's going to be good. He's going to be great. He's going to be able to contend for the win. I'm kind of with you. I definitely think that's a bit of a stretch, but if I am on his team and I'm quite content with the way this week went.
Mikel Landa was strong. The rest of the team. You saw in the finale, Carlos Rodriguez, 5 teammates and a guy in the breakaway. It's only 7 men in the race. And Mikel Landa, that's maybe for Soudal and Remco Evenepoel, something we'll be talking a lot about. That if Remco does find himself in a position to get a high place in the overall standings, what kind of team support he will have in those critical moments. That might be the big difference in the Tour de France this year.
Yeah, and Elan van Wilder as well, a rider who was riding very well. I don't know how beat up he was from one of those crashes, for example, but he was nowhere to be seen. Yeah, so that's a great point to bring up, especially with these teams seemingly so just getting stronger and stronger every year. And it's not just one team, it's several teams. Just like we had the same conversation with the sprint trains with, for one point in time, there's only one team, now 2 teams. Now there's 7 or 8 teams who have incredible sprint trains, all dedicated to try to win sprint stages. Same thing goes with the general classification. Whether or not that really means a difference, though, Bob, of winning or losing, because you still need to have someone who's going to finish off the job. Ineos has had a strong team many times, but they never had the guy who really good across the line, especially with these 2, talents that are just really, they're generational talents with Jonas and Tadej. So what's going to happen this year? Who knows? There's always a revelation, just like we saw this week with Derek G. Usually there's a revelation in the Tour de France as well. Most times we know by now who's going to be there. And I'm not going to say there's going to be a Derek G at the Tour. I'm hoping for him. I think it's always great. But when Tadej took Primož Roglič down a step back in 2020, we didn't see that coming though either. And Planche de Belfi. There's no way. I thought Primoz 100% had in the bag. That's why we race, and that's why we just keep on pushing forward.
That's why we race, and that's why we are always looking forward to the Tour de France, and we're only 20 days away from it now. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you soon on Beyond the Podium, and before you know it, the Tour de France will be here. Thanks, everybody, for watching.